and welcome back to another episode of 52 Weeks, 52 Amazing Authors. I'm Dr. Lisa L. Campbell, the Growth Motivator, and I am joined today by author Suhabia Neill. Hi there.
Good morning.
How are you?
Good, and you?
Good.
Glad to be here.
Yes, Happy New Year, right? And it's starting off with a bang, lots and lots of snow and temperatures that are not what some states are used to. My daughter is in Houston and she's talking about it's cold here and it's not supposed to be this cold.
It is snowing here today in Philadelphia at the moment, so.
Yes, lots of fun. So today we're talking about your book published last year, 2023, Like a Girl, 22 Leadership Lessons for the Woman on the Rise. Tell our listening and viewing audience what made you write this book at that time.
So I've started a lot of books. Actually, I studied writing for children for a long time, and this was a book probably 2 years ago about now. It came to me to finish it. So I had the beginning, I had the outline, and I think the final push was my daughter entering college and having her kind of in the real world now and on her own and having to navigate things. And so that was probably that final push for me to finish it. And essentially, actually, my book birthday and her birthday are the same, which is really cool because I'll never forget it. So this was my gift to her for her 19th birthday, but also my gift to the world and all the other women on the rise. And I say on the rise because I feel like no matter how old you are or where you are in life, there's always more. Like my mom is in her 70s now, and she's like, I'm waiting for my next assignment, and she's definitely paid her dues and done her part with, using her gift. But I feel like we're always, or should always, continue to evolve and kind of aim to just get to that next level for ourselves, whatever that looks like.
Well, tell mom that I turned 50 in 2023.
Okay.
And at the end of 2023, I moved into what I like to call the preferment stage of life. And basically what that means, I'm only doing what I prefer to do.
There you go.
And the things that I prefer to do are those that are transformational for the lives of others. And so it's a comfortable place to be because I gave up some things to get to this place. But this is my next season of life. And I'm sure, like mom, I'll have another season at 70. My mom just told me a couple of days ago about all the traveling that she wants to do. I'm like, isn't something going on with your leg or something? How are we going to do all this traveling? She was like, I'm grown. I'm going to do all of those things. And I think, mindset plays a huge role in being able to do the things, even in the midst of those roadblocks that you may be faced with.
And I think, again, for me, being at the age I am now, so I'm 46, and I'm happy to tell people that doesn't bother me anymore if you ask me how old I am. I've learned enough to hopefully be helpful to those behind, and like those that are still in that similar lane that I'm in, can relate to things. And so, like I said, I've definitely been blessed to have an amazing mother and an amazing daughter, and we have a triple generation here now where we've got a great relationship, and they really have helped to push me, like you said, to kind of sometimes do the scary things, take the leap and share. That's the goal. Is as much as I love to write, talking about it isn't always easy, but like you got to do it. So, now that the book is out there, that's the goal, is to share it with as many women. And I tease smart men will read it as well, because it does apply. I'd say that 21 chapters apply to everyone. The chapter on trusting your gut and women's intuition, that one's just for us. But I always say too that awareness is really the key to everything. And so having an increased level of awareness as what it's like to be a woman in a mostly dominant male world is important for men as well, to kind of understand and see the other side of things.
I love it. One of my previous guests, her book was titled Speak Up, I Can't Hear You, The Voice of a Woman. And I am reminded about how important our voice is on a daily basis. And the number one reason is 32 years ago, I gave birth to a little girl who was born deaf, nonverbal, and has several developmental delays. And right after I had her, I was still trying to find my voice, but then now all of a sudden I became responsible for someone else who I had to be their voice, their advocate. And so I realized a long time ago how powerful my voice is. And my father recently sent me a copy of my report card from high school, which then took me back to elementary school. And back then in the report card, they would have on the back, they would have these little check marks. And mine was constantly is talking. And I think back on that because my husband jokes with me all the time. You love to hear yourself talk. I'm like, no, I just enjoy engaging with others, cultivating relationships. And I've been in rooms with men who tried to take my voice from me. And I was not having it. We always talk about we want a seat at the table. I'm like, I'm in the room. You're going to know that I'm in the room. Whether I say something or not, my presence is going to be known, whether it's me smiling or nodding or how I'm demonstrating that, hey, I'm here, whether you like it or not. And then when I open my voice and say something, it's powerful, it's impactful, and there's no stopping me.
Yeah, it's funny too, because so the first chapter of my book, and it starts, I tease when I'm 4 in gymnastics, it's called Be Fearless. And so for me, when I was little, I was not loud and quiet. I was the kid. They actually weren't going to let me start kindergarten because they didn't think that I was verbal enough. And my mom's like, no, she talks. She's coming to school. If I didn't know you, I was like quiet as a church mouse. So I like to get my bearings first before I engage. But I was fearless and I was tiny. So I was in gymnastics. And one of the reasons that's the start of the book is that I feel like at some point along the line, unfortunately, we lose something that we had when we were little and that is really innate and in us. But whether it's society or family or friends or school, whatever it is, you kind of lose that. So for me, that's where it started with the Be Fearless and just like I said, having the courage, so the process of writing this book was like nerve-wracking and then exciting and then nerve-wracking and then exciting. So it was back and forth and I'm like, is this really good enough to put out in the world? And who am I to tell somebody, how to be better, in terms of leadership? But got a lot of good encouragement from behind the scenes and then a lot of good feedback after the release about how much this was needed, which is kind of sad still to think that we're in 2024 and women in leadership is still such a big issue. But I think it's in there and it's a matter of realizing that, oh, I was fearless once and I can be fearless again. I can kind of quiet the external clutter and noise and channel that little girl inside of me, that inner voice that said, you can do it and go for it again. So that was one of the other goals, was to kind of give everybody that permission to remember who they were before you got shaped and molded potentially a little bit kind of in the wrong direction and get back on track for. I think it's just kind of maybe par for the course a little bit when you get married and you have kids as a woman, you kind of can't help but lose yourself a little bit in the wife and the mother and those roles. But my goal is, and I told a friend of mine actually who's probably in her early 30s and just got married, I said, just pay attention and don't lose yourself. She's like, you have no idea how much I needed to hear that. So I always encourage people, like, if I've already been there and done that and I can help you, I keep, like I said, be more aware of what's coming down the pipeline so that you don't get blindsided or you don't get too far off track. That's really the goal, is that, like, we need all of these women leaders. We need them all to have different personalities and different kind of ways they operate and be in different spaces. And that was the ultimate goal, was to share my story in the hopes of it resonates with someone else and it helps them to maybe, stand a little taller or speak a little louder or, say, excuse me, but I don't think that's quite right, and I still have moments where I'm quiet when I shouldn't be, and then I kick myself later. So I'm a work in progress. I think we all are, but it's just knowing that you're not alone in it and that we've all been there, done that. Or, I tease my daughter. I'm like, there's some lessons you really don't have to learn the hard way. But if you want to, be my guest. So that's the goal, is to really just, like I said, the best compliment I think I've gotten so far in the book was that it was relatable. And that was really important to me, is that I don't want to ever feel like I'm up here somewhere where, like, there's this huge gap between me and the audience. It's like I'm a real human being living my life just like you every day. There are moments when I still don't trust my gut, even though that's like my favorite chapter and the most important one as far as I'm concerned. So that was the goal in the process, is to just really encourage people to take another and closer look at who they are and where they are and what they may want to focus on next, to kind of become, I think, honestly, a better leader for yourself first.
Yes,
And then, if,
yes.
you're the leader of your life, you set a great example. I've seen it with my daughter over the years, like, they're listening and they're watching. And so that, really perked my ears up, that I need to make sure I'm setting the good example and not just talking about it, but, walking the walk. So being a good leader for yourself and then expanding that out in the world with family and work and wherever you can make an impact and, help someone else kind of find their spot in that leadership role as well.
Would you say that writing this book really, really helped you?
I think it clarified a lot of things. And like I said, for me, part of me, I teased the very first time I talked about the book was to a group of all women in the painting industry, which is what the background is in. So 20 years in a family business, which is residential painting, mostly male dominated. And this was actually the first time that the association had a conference just for women. There were 92 of us in the room. It was really cool. And I had to admit that I suffer from no big deal syndrome. So like I said, my grandfather was a writer. My great grandmother was a writer. My great great grandmother was a writer. Some of those books behind me are theirs that I was able to find online, dating back to like the early 1900s, which is really cool. But so it's always been on my list to write a book. So at first it was like no big deal because I've been trying to check this off my list for a really long time. And then I remembered that it is a big deal. And I actually had a mentor tell me, you will never have another first book. So make sure you celebrate that. And that's when it hit me that that's why this had to be the first book, because it is my story. So my writing mentor always told me to write my story, tell my story. You have a great story to tell. And actually, that may be another book later on. She was referring to being mixed. So growing up with Black mom, white dad in kind of a prominently white neighborhood. So not a lot of African Americans, not a lot of mixed kids, but what that experience was like for me. So that may come later, but this was also my story and like I tease in the book, it's normal to me. So it doesn't even phase me anymore. I have one networking group I'm in still. That's fabulous, but it's all men and me. And we had a couple women kind of come and go. And I know my coach is really always looking to add more women to the group, but doesn't even phase me anymore. So that has been my life and my world for so long. All brothers, all male dominated industries, that it doesn't even occur to me. But not all of us have that quiet confidence to be okay in that space, like you said, and to speak up when necessary.
I
And to
have found
speak up
that many
again.
women, yes,
It's
I have
trouble
found that
over.
many women suffer from imposter syndrome. And it's so hurtful when I see it happening because we're like unintentionally self-sabotaging ourselves. And a lot of times when people see me in a room, first in my industry, healthcare administration,
Right.
some women have, a master's degree or a bachelor's degree. I have a doctorate degree. People immediately think that I'm up here. And I'm like, no, I have this doctorate degree, honestly, because I was teaching at a university and I was like, how can I make more money? They're like, you need a doctorate degree. I was like, all right, you don't have to tell me but once, right? But I think my confidence, my inner confidence, I was born with. And there were times when I did lose my way. And when I actually wrote my first book in 2023 as well, called Grow with Me. And in the book, I disclose, my journey, the things that, tried to take me out. I tried to take my life 2 years after having a special needs daughter. And I freed myself from a lot of guilt when I was writing the book. And I never thought I would write a book. But the first 4 chapters, I didn't physically write. I spoke to my computer and I cried and I laughed and I reflected. And it really unleashed something inside of me that I was allowing other situations to hold me hostage. And so towards the end of the book, the first book, I was like, oh, there's a second part to this. And I immediately, before the first book was even published, immediately started talking to the computer again to get those thoughts out of my head so that I continue to help others. And one of the things I realized when I was writing the book, I sent a text message to several of my family members, colleagues, and said, hey, name 3 words that you would use to describe me. And when they told me those 3 words, I was like, wow, that is me, right? I knew that that was me. But as I get older, I am, of course, much more mature, always seeking to be more emotionally intelligent. And something that I like that I read in chapter 22 or lesson 22, never stop learning. I believe you should be learning faster than you're growing so that when you get to the place that you're supposed to be, you're ready. It's like those seeds that you're planting in the ground and now you're watering that process, which really, when you come out on the other side, whenever that time period happens, you're like, wow, I'm ready. But I think sometimes we allow people, situations to hold us back. Now, unlike you, I was married later in life. And so one of the struggles that we had was I was Lisa Campbell, and you were not going to change Lisa Campbell, right? And so here we are now, 16 years later. We both have changed so that we could continue to maintain our separate identities, but then, be together as husband and wife. And it's been an amazing experience because it has helped both of us grow.
Yeah, and so for me, it's funny because I'm the opposite. You've got your doctorate. I'm the one that I'm like, but I only have an undergrad degree. And they're like, yeah, and 25 years of experience. I'm like, oh. And also, like you said, with the learning, like I'm always, my biggest issue is I can't remember where I read something because I read all over the place. So I'm on LinkedIn, I'm watching stuff on YouTube, I'm reading books, I'm listening to stuff in the car. And so, like, I'll hear things and I'm like, I don't remember where I heard it, but I know I heard it somewhere. And then to take you back to my first love and my favorite thing of all, which is basketball, there was a young guy, I'm not sure what team he was on, so if you're not familiar with the NBA, they have like the minors, the way that the baseball and everything does, it's called the G League. So a young guy in the G League wanted to get up to the NBA level and he asked his coach, what do I need to do? And he told him, be ready so you don't have to get ready. And that like totally shifted my mindset of like, maybe I'm not there yet, but the minute I get there, I want to be ready already. And so for me, the continuous learning and education is really important so that, like I said, you can ward off the imposter syndrome. Sometimes people say things to me, and my coach actually, who is a man at the moment, I had a leadership coach who was a woman a couple of years ago. I've worked with a lot of different coaches on the court and off the court in all of my years. He's the one that always tells me, you're ready. You like, because I'm that person, like every I has to be dotted, every T has to be crossed. It's got to be 100% done before I'll put it out into the world. He's like, no, you're good and you're ready. Just do it. So, but that one's always stuck with me is like, don't wait till you get there to get ready. Get ready right now. Be ready right now. And like you said, that continued evolution of when you step into that room, knowing that, oh, yes, I do belong here. Like, and let that imposter syndrome go. And just, like you said, take your seat, use your voice and kind of don't be the shy, quiet one. When you know you have something important to give and to share. The other thing I always tease people is if you're not sure what you're really good at or what your gift is, ask some people that are close to you and they'll tell you really easily and very quickly what your gift is. Sometimes we can't see it because it's, it just is so easy for us that it doesn't make sense that it wouldn't be easy for others. That's what happened with me in my consulting world. So I'm really good with systems and processes. And to me, the world is basically just a puzzle. And I didn't realize it probably until like 42 that not everybody's brain works that way. And I'm like, well, what do you mean you don't know how to figure it out? Yeah, we don't know how to figure this out. So sometimes your gift isn't obvious to you because it's just so easy and it just comes so naturally. But once you figure out that that's what it is, then there's a way to, like I said, kind of nurture it and then share it with the world.
Absolutely. So in lesson 16, you talk about get comfortable with having the difficult conversations. What would you say to a young woman who's struggling with that aspect, right? So she read lesson 16, but she's like, I still need something to help get me over this hump.
I think a really, really deep breath and a pause. I think in the business world, like, so for me, being in a leadership role in our business, and some of the guys that work for us are older than me, and technically I'm their superior, and we've got to have conversations, being prepared ahead of time if you know you're going to have a difficult conversation. And I like to call it staying neutral. So, like, not getting into, the I, me, my, and, being in a neutral space where I think actually it's funny because the systems and processes person in me, like having a system and a process and having a handbook for the business and having, we call them rules of the road, like this is how we operate, that actually makes it easier to have a difficult conversation. So if you're in an office environment where there are like no rules and no regulations and no core values and it's like everything's out of balance, it gets pretty difficult. But if you have clarity around things, then it's easier to say, hey, look, this was one of our core values. We're having an issue because it's not being honored. And then can we talk about it? So actually one of my clients very early on, who the first guy that trusted me to help him get his business more organized, was having a trouble with one of his employees. And he said, it's just so not like him. He's on time all the time. He's usually like alert and, on top of everything. And this past week, he's been late. He's been disheveled. He's been like kind of all over the place. So they sat him down and he talked about, these are our core values. This is how we operate. And, this is really just not acceptable. And it's just black and white. Like, these are the rules. It's, I tease, I call them like the house rules at home with my stepkids and with my daughter. They are what they are. I don't have a lot of them because I think when that list gets really long, then it gets hard. But there are like 3 or 4 core things that are non-negotiable and everybody knows. And if you have a day where you're having a bad day and you're out of bounds, which is what happened with this gentleman, he discovered actually it was when there was a lot of stuff going on in the city of Philadelphia and it was stressful and he was taking his work truck home and he was afraid something was going to happen to the truck because he lived in the city and like it was when the riots were happening a couple of years ago. It was just kind of a mess and it was stressing him out. So by having the conversation of these are the rules, you really have been kind of slipping these last couple of days. And by the way, is something going on? So I think having it be business first and then being able to address the personal side really makes, I think, all the difference in having a difficult conversation with someone, but definitely being prepared ahead of time. I'm that person that runs through conversations in my head and puts down some bullet points, things we want to talk about, and then making sure at the end there's some kind of action plan. Like, so what are we going to do about this? And how are we going to move forward? And when are we going to check back in to make sure that things are moving in the right direction? I think if you're not the leader and you have to have a difficult conversation with the boss, the same thing, still be prepared, and know that it's okay to bring. So I have a thing where like my door is always open and I tell the guys all the time. And actually a funny story was one year we gave out first aid kits and then, all the guys keep them in their trucks and we had monthly meetings and I always ask the guys at the end of the meeting, do you need anything, Sometimes they needed new equipment. Sometimes they needed this, that, the other. One guy, he's like, it's going to sound really silly. He's like, but the Band-Aids in that new first aid kit, they're not sticky. He's like, they don't work. I'm like, all right, there we go. I'm like, I'm going to order you some Band-Aid brand Band-Aids and everybody will get them, as soon as they're here. So when you have an open door and you build relationships and you focus on, and I tease all the time, especially now in this age of technology, relationships are going to matter more than ever. I think with the computer is good for certain things, but people need people at the end of the day. So for me in my leadership role, I was like, whatever you need, I have a little post-it note that lives on my computer in my office that's almost faded to like not being readable anymore that says, how can I make your day better? So as a leader, that's my goal. Like, how do I make your day better? How do I make your job easier? And when you come at it with that approach, I think it makes a huge difference in what you get back from employees and how people will open up to you and be honest with, the little things. And if they're honest with the little things, they're more likely to be honest with the big things. But the other thing I will say, and I know this was a long-winded answer because I've seen it from both sides in a lot of different, scenarios over the years. Not having the difficult conversation when it's necessary is 100 times worse than having it because everybody knows you should have had it and then things just balloon, and it just gets worse as opposed to deal with it in the moment, move on, and everybody can kind of exhale and breathe on the other side of it. So it's definitely something to practice and get comfortable with. And like I said, that bullet points and the deep breath beforehand and staying neutral really helps me. But avoiding them is way, way worse than getting comfortable enough to have them when necessary.
I love it. Even though you said it was long-winded, it was impactful. In my mind, I was like, you are the leader's leader. You really have the skill set and the tactics to help others in those difficult situations. In the book, you talk about being a good listener. And I think being a good listener, being a good communicator, attacking things head on are critical. I tend to, when I notice someone is off balance, I tend to first ask, how are you? Because oftentimes that relaxes them and allows them to be more vulnerable with you. But I've also found that your subordinates or those even above you, they don't see you as a real person. It's hard to open up to you. And so when I said I'm going to read the book again, this project that I'm entering in is going to be in a health system where more than likely I will be a minority as a woman, as an African American woman, but I have 32 years of expertise in the area that I'm going to consult on. But my number one goal is always to develop relationships. I have the names of the stakeholders, and when I get on site, I need to build an avatar for each stakeholder so that when conflict arises, I will have established that relationship with them and we can have the uncomfortable conversations. I read a book called Critical Conversations. I don't know if you've read that book. And that book also helped me in terms of how I navigate the workplace, but also how I navigate my interactions with my adult children, now with the grandchildren, but then also how my husband and I interact. And the more we improve those skills and learn from those lessons, we will grow. And I have to be honest, I'm afraid about the future, right? Like what the future is going to hold, which is good because, it's called the future for a reason. But I feel that many of us don't have these lessons, and we all, in some shape, form, or fashion, need to do the work. We have to do the work so that we can improve and have better relationships.
Yeah, and then the last thing I wanted to say, though, that I kind of forgot about is in the beginning, my definition of leadership was totally wrong. So what I thought a leader looked like and acted like and should be, totally wrong. Like, I mean, not wrong, but the point is we're all leaders. We all have different styles and they're all necessary for success. So that was really what was important to me, is like getting back to you. What type of leader do you want to be? And what does that look like for you? And staying in that space so that you don't get, like I said, shaped and molded, unfortunately, in the wrong way from the outside. Like, it's an internal job. So figure it out for you.
I love it. I taught a graduate course on campus. Hadn't been on campus in like 20 something years to teach a class. Have been teaching online. And this was a group of young emerging healthcare leaders. And one of the things I said to them during week one, my class that I was teaching them was on strategic planning, but we talked about leadership styles. First of all, understanding the different leadership styles, and then doing an inventory to figure out which leader you are, but also which type of leader you need to be in certain situations, right? I, in most situations, am a transformational leader, right? Even when I'm not trying to be. Figuring out who you are is so important because others will quickly define you based upon what they think. I remember being in a room with someone who talked about in certain communities, certain things happen. And so I was just looking, because sometimes, I'll just, as a woman, I just look, and they're like, you don't agree. And I said, it's not that I don't agree. That's not my story. I grew up in the inner city of Chicago, but the things that you're describing, I didn't experience. So we make these assumptions about people and their circumstances based on unfortunately, our own biases. So tell our listening and viewing audience where they can get a copy of your book.
So it is on Amazon, and you can do a paperback or an ebook, depending on how you like to read. And it's actually, once you're done with that, you can buy it direct through the publisher if you wanted to do that as well. I'm pretty sure the pricing and the shipping is the same, so it's just a matter of preference. But also on my website, which has to do more with the consulting business, but is shifting now as I've moved into the leadership space, the fullcirclebusiness.net. I have a designated page at the top of the menu called Like a Girl that has some additional resources. You can look at them now, and they makes more sense if you've already read the book, but everything else that I talked about in the book, there are additional resources there as well to kind of help further you in, like I said, that new kind of rediscovery of yourself as a leader and what you want that to look like. So
I love it. Well, I want to thank you so much for having the conversation with me. I look forward to seeing what's next for you. I know that you don't like to talk, but I see you on stages having this intimate conversation with the masses. They need you. They need your voice because many of them have lost their way, and they need someone, and I'll say this in my healthcare language, they need someone to say, charge to 300, clear, and resuscitate them and get them back on track.
it is on my to-do list for 2024. So my speaker's bio page is ready. I have my graphic designer make it pretty for me. And so it's funny. I tease it's not my favorite place to be, but there's a chapter about public speaking and you can learn how I got over it and figure out how to get over it for yourself if necessary. Not everybody has that issue, but I did realize that it's the best place for me to be to make the biggest impact. So I have gotten over it. I tease it now, actually. I still get nervous in the beginning, but then I get excited and it's almost a little bit addictive, that rush of being on stage. And then for me as an introvert, there's the crash an
Yes.
hour after I get off of stage, but it's all worth it in the end. So that is on my to-do list. And again, that's about pushing myself outside of my comfort zone and, no fear, go for it. The world needs it. And, it's my responsibility to share it. That was my gift. I discovered that was my gift. Now my responsibility is to share it with the world. So here I am, the introvert on podcasts and YouTube videos and on stages soon to come.
I love it. I love it. And I look forward to watching your journey because I can see it clear in my mind, right? You're on this stage, and maybe you're not standing initially. Maybe you are in a chair, you're having this intimate conversation. And then women, men start to come to the mic and ask you questions, and you're up on your feet, right? And you're empowering them. But then you'll let your handler know when this is over, get me off the stage because I don't want to be in the audience doing that. I'll go to a table and sign a few books and have a couple of intimate conversations, but I too get nervous when I'm speaking. I've been speaking for 25 years, and the day before I'm scheduled to have a talk, my stomach is insanely just out of control. I am not able to sleep, and the minute my feet hit the stage, all bets are off. All right. Well, thank you so much. And I look forward to seeing about your future success.
Thank you for having me and letting me share my story.
Thank you.